A rancher adopted the most hated horse at the auction. No one expected what happened next. The crowd laughed when he raised his hand, calling him a fool, saying the beast was cursed. The horse had scars, a trail of blood behind it, and a reputation for killing any man who touched a rope to its neck. But under the crackle of a barn lantern, when the hymn of mercy filled the night, the beast lowered its head, and everything changed. What seemed like madness became a miracle. Yet miracles have enemies. Whispers spread through town. Old grudges surface. And a dark truth rides toward his ranch. The horse once belonged to a betrayed people, and men of greed will stop at nothing to claim it. Now, the rancher stands between a violent past, a broken son, and the most dangerous secret the frontier has ever seen. Will faith and gentleness be enough to save them all? Or will the most hated horse drag every soul into ruin? Comment below and tell me where in the world you're joining from. And if this story made you pause for a moment, hit that subscribe button for more. Late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty county fairgrounds as wagons and riders streamed in from all directions. The air hummed with the sounds of frontier commerce, chickens clucking from their wooden crates, sheep bleating in temporary pens, and the constant murmur of townsfolk haggling over prices. Children darted between the legs of adults, their laughter mixing with the sharp ring of the auctioneer's bell. Ethan Morrow stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, his weathered hat pulled low against the setting sun, his worn boots faded. Denham spoke of hard work and lean times, but his eyes remained gentle as he watched the proceedings. The other ranchers avoided his gaze, some muttering about poor old Morrow, who couldn't keep his spread profitable since losing his wife. Sheriff Wade Matthews appeared at the front of the gathering, leading a magnificent bay stallion that drew everyone's attention. The horse's coat gleamed despite the dust and grime, but angry scars crossed its flanks and shoulders. Its eyes rolled white with fear and fury as it fought against the lead rope. Next up for auction, the sheriff announced, his voice tight with tension. Is this here stallion known as Satan's Fury? Previous owner died trying to break him. Horse has killed 3 handlers since then. He paused as the crowd muttered darkly. County seized him for public safety. Oping bid at $5. The stallion reared suddenly, hooves slashing the air. Women gasped and pulled their children back. The sheriff barely held on to the rope. Just shoot the devil beast, someone shouted from the crowd. Others joined in with angry agreement. Ain't natural for a horse to be that mean. It'll kill again if you don't put it down. Ethan watched the horse closely, noting how it trembled despite its displays of aggression. Its eyes darted frantically between the faces surrounding it, like a cornered creature expecting only pain. $5, the auctioneer called hopefully. Do I hear $5 for this fine piece of horseflesh? Silence fell across the fairgrounds, broken only by the nervous stamping of the stallion's hooves in the dust. Going once at $5, Ethan's hand rose slowly into the air. I'll give you $20 for him. The crowd turned as one to stare at him. Someone laughed sharply. $20? The auctioneer blinked in surprise. I have $20 from Ethan Morrow. Do I hear 25? Luke Morrow pushed through the crowd to his father's side, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Pa, what are you doing? That's grocery money. Son, Ethan said quietly, some things are worth more than groceries. You can't save every broken thing that comes along. Luke's voice rose, drawing more stares. The ranch is failing because you won't make hard choices. Now you're throwing away good money on a killer horse? The auctioneer's voice cut through. Their argument. Going once at $20, going twice. Let someone else deal with that devil, Luke pleaded. We can't afford this. Ethan kept his hand raised, his expression serene despite his son's protests. The Lord provides, Luke. We just have to trust in his timing. Sold. The auctioneer's gavel cracked like a gunshot. To Ethan Morrow for $20, Luke threw up his hands in disgust. You're a fool. Well, a soft-hearted fool who will end up dead broke or just dead. He stormed away through the dispersing crowd. Shoulders rigid with anger. Sheriff Matthews approached, leading the stallion, which danced nervously at the end of the rope. "Marl, I've got to tell you, this here's a mistake. This horse ain't natural. Something broke in him long ago." "Much obliged for your concern, Sheriff," Ethan said mildly, reaching for his wallet. The worn leather contained exactly $20, the last of his savings. He counted out the bills carefully and handed them over. The sheriff shook his head as he passed over the lead rope. "Your funeral, Marl? Don't come crying to me when this beast puts you in the ground like the others." The sun had nearly set by the time Ethan began the long walk home. He'd borrowed a lantern from the fairground keeper, its yellow light bobbing gently as he led the stallion along the rutted road. The horse followed at the end of the rope, tense but not fighting, its hoofbeats a counterpoint to Ethan's steady stride when they passed other riders heading home from the auction. Ethan heard their whispered comments. "There goes old Morrow, throwing good money after bad. Always was soft in the head since his wife passed. That killer horse will be the death of him." Ethan paid them no mind, keeping his pace steady and his grip gentle but firm on the lead rope. As darkness settled across the prairie, he began to hum an old hymn. The stallion's ears flicked forward at the sound, and some of the tension seemed to ease from its powerful frame. "Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound," Ethan sang softly as they walked. "That saved a wretch like me." The horse moved closer, drawn perhaps by the gentle voice or simply seeking comfort in the gathering night. "I once was lost, but now I am found, was blind, but now I see." The lantern light caught the scars on the stallion's flanks, telling tales of whips and spurs and cruel handling. But beneath the marks of abuse, Ethan saw the proud arch of the neck, the intelligent eyes, the powerful muscles that spoke of great potential. "You and me," he murmured to the horse, "we've got something to prove to them all, don't we? But more importantly, we've got healing to do." The stallion nickered softly, as if in response. "They see only what was broken. We'll show them what can be made whole again." The moon rose over the prairie as man and horse made their way home, their shadows merging into one long shape on the dusty road. Behind them, the lights of the fairground faded into the darkness, along with the doubtful voices and scornful laughter. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also possibility. And sometimes, Ethan knew, that was enough to build on. His son's angry words echoed in his mind, but Ethan's heart remained peaceful. Luke was young yet, seeing the world in sharp lines of profit and loss. He hadn't learned that some investments couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. Sometimes the most valuable things were the ones others had given up on, whether they were horses or hopes or prodigal sons. The lantern light swayed with each step, leading them home through the gathering night. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, Ethan was content to walk in faith, one steady step at a time, with a frightened horse learning to trust again at his side. The weathered barn door creaked on its hinges as Ethan led the stallion inside. Lantern light cast long shadows across the straw-strewn floor, highlighting empty stalls that once housed a prosperous herd. Now only two elderly workhorses dozed in their quarters, lifting their heads with mild interest at the newcomer's arrival. Ethan moved deliberately, keeping his movements slow and predictable as he guided the stallion into the largest stall. The horse's muscles remained taut, ready to bolt, but something had shifted during their long walk home. It no longer fought against the lead rope, though its eyes still darted anxiously at every sound. "Easy now," Ethan murmured, checking the stall's sturdy gait. "You're safe here." He filled the water trough and measured out a portion of oats, mixed with a handful of the summer's sweet hay. The stallion's nostrils flared at the scent, but it made no move toward the feed, watching. Ethan warily instead. The kitchen light glowed warm through the farmhouse windows, and Ethan's boots echoed on the porch steps. Inside, Luke stood at the stove, stirring a pot of beans with sharp, angry movements. The table was set for 2 cornbread cooling beside a jar of milk. "Supper's about ready," Luke said stiffly, not turning around. "Much obliged." Ethan washed, his hands at the sink, the familiar scent of lye soap mixing with the aroma of cooking. Smells good. Smells good. They sat down to eat, the silence broken only by the scrape of spoons against bowls. The empty chair where Ethan's wife Sarah used to sit seemed to grow larger between them. A void neither man knew how to fill. Finally, Luke set down his spoon with a clatter. "You can't keep doing this, Pa." Ethan looked up, patient. "Doing what, son?" "Taking in every broken-down creature that crosses your path. First it was that three-legged calf last spring. Then those half-wild chickens from the McCullough place. Now a killer horse?" Luke's voice rose with each example. "The ranch is barely staying afloat as it is. We can't afford your reckless charity." "The calf lived and gave us good meat for winter," Ethan reminded him quietly. "Those chickens lay the finest eggs in the county." "That's not the point." Luke pushed back from the table, his chair scraping across the wooden floor. "That horse is different. It's dangerous. You're going to get yourself killed. And for what? To prove you can save something that's better off put down." Ethan set his own spoon down carefully. "I couldn't stand by and watch them condemn that creature without giving it a chance. Luke, not when I saw the fear in its eyes. Someone hurt that horse badly, broke its trust in people. That's not the same as being naturally vicious. So now, you're a horse expert?" Luke's laugh was bitter. "Ma always said your soft heart would be the end of you." Looks like she was right. The mention of Sarah hung heavy in the air between them. Ethan's expression remained gentle, though pain flickered in his eyes. "Your mother had the kindest heart of anyone I've known. She taught me that mercy isn't weakness. It's the strongest choice we can make." "Mercy won't pay the mortgage." Luke slammed his palm against the table, making the dishes rattle. "Or fix the fence line, or buy seed for spring planting." "We're drowning here, Pa, and you just spent our last $20 on a horse that's likely to kill you." "The Lord provides," Ethan began. "Don't." Luke cut him off, standing abruptly. "Don't talk to me about faith and providence. I won't stay here and watch you destroy everything we have left." He strode to the door, pausing with his hand on the latch. "I won't be part of your ruin, Pa. You want to throw it all away on lost causes? Do it without me?" The door banged shut. Behind him, through the window, Ethan watched his son's figure disappear into the darkness, shoulders hunched against the night wind. The empty kitchen seemed to echo with Luke's words, mixing with memories of other doors slammed in anger, other bitter partings. Ethan cleared the table methodically, washing each dish and putting it away. When the kitchen was tidy, he took up the lantern and walked back out to the barn. The night had grown cool, crickets chirping in the tall grass beyond the corrals. Inside, the stallion stood motionless in its stall, feet untouched. Its ears pricked forward at Ethan's approach, but it made no aggressive moves. In the lantern light, the scars on its hide stood out like silver threads, telling stories of whips and harsh hands. Ethan hung the lantern on a hook and settled onto an old crate near the stall. Clasping his weathered hands, he bowed his head. In prayer, "Lord," he whispered, "give me wisdom to help this creature. Show me how to heal what men have broken. And please, watch over my boy wherever he's gone tonight. Help him understand that sometimes your greatest works start with the things others have given up on." The stallion shifted restlessly, hooves rustling in the straw. Ethan began to sing softly, an old hymn his mother had taught him long ago. "Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart." The melody floated through the barn's shadowy interior. Gentle as falling snow, the horse snorted once, then gradually lowered its proud head. Its breathing slowed, matching the rhythm of the hymn. Ethan continued singing, keeping his voice low and soothing. As the last notes faded, he rose carefully and approached the stall. "Easy now," he murmured. "Easy there." The stallion watched him, but the white-rimmed panic had faded from its eyes. Slowly, so slowly, Ethan extended his hand. The horse flinched slightly, but didn't retreat. His fingers made contact with the warm neck, feeling the strong pulse beneath. "The scarred hide. You're not vicious at all, are you?" Ethan said softly. "Just hurt and frightened." treated so badly you forgot how to trust. He stroked the strong neck gently. But we'll change that. I promise you'll know nothing but kindness here. The stallion's muscles quivered under his touch, but it didn't pull away. They stayed like that for a long moment, man and horse connected by that cautious touch, while the lantern flame flickered and night sounds drifted through the barn's weather-worn walls. Dawn found Ethan back in the barn, checking on his new charge. The stallion had eaten during the night, and it lifted its head at his approach with less fear than before. That fragile thread of trust, barely begun, gave him hope. He was mucking out the stall when he heard horses approaching. Through the barn door, he saw 3 of his neighbors riding past, their faces dark with disapproval as they spotted him. Morrow's lost his mind for sure now, one called to the others, loud enough to carry clearly. Taking in that killer beast. Won't be long before we're bearing him to the churchyard, another replied grimly. Man's got more faith than sense. Their laughter drifted back as they rode on. The stallion's ears flattened at their voices, but it remained calm, watching Ethan steadily. He smiled and spoke softly to the horse as he continued his work. Let them talk, he murmured. We know better, don't we? Sometimes the things people are quickest to condemn just need a little patience and understanding to show their true nature. The morning sun streamed through the barn's high windows, catching the stallion's coat and making it glow like burnished copper. In that moment, despite Luke's absence and the neighbor's dark predictions, Ethan felt a quiet certainty that he'd made the right choice. The horse's response to gentle handling proved what his heart had known at the auction. There was something worth saving here. If only someone was willing to try. The rooster's crow pierced the pre-dawn silence as Ethan pulled his worn boots on by lamplight. His muscles ached from yesterday's work, but years of ranch life had taught him that animals didn't care if their keeper was tired. They needed tending all the same. The kitchen felt especially empty this morning after Luke's departure. Ethan lit the stove and put the coffee on, then grabbed his coat from its peg by the door. The autumn air held a sharp bite as he stepped outside, his breath making little clouds in the gray light. Old Belle, his spotted milk cow, greeted him with a gentle moo as he entered the barn. The stallion's head appeared over its stall door. Ears pricked forward with interest. Ethan noticed the water bucket was empty again. Thirsty one, aren't you? He said softly, filling it from the pump. That's good. Means you're settling in. He milked Belle with practiced motions, the warm streams hitting the pail with a rhythmic ping. The stallion watched every movement, and no longer showing the wild-eyed panic of yesterday. When Ethan finished with Belle, he gathered a measure of oats in a shallow pan. Let's see how you feel about breakfast, he murmured, approaching the stall slowly. The horse's nostrils flared, catching the sweet grain smell. It stepped back as Ethan opened the door, but didn't retreat to the far corner like before. Easy. Now, Ethan held the pan out, keeping his movements smooth and unhurried. The stallion's ears worked back and forth, torn between hunger and suspicion. Finally, it stretched its neck out, lips reaching for the oats. Ethan stayed perfectly still as the horse began to eat. After a few mouthfuls, he slowly raised his empty hand. The stallion flinched, but didn't stop eating. Very gently he touched its neck. The powerful muscles trembled under his fingers, but the horse allowed the contact. There now, Ethan said softly. Not so terrible, is it? Just takes a little trust on both sides. He left the stallion to finish its breakfast and went to tend the chickens. The scraggly flock his neighbors had scorned now produced the best eggs in the county. Just as he told Luke, sometimes the things others gave up on just needed patience and care to thrive. The morning passed quickly with regular chores. After a simple lunch of bread and cheese, Ethan loaded his tool belt and headed out to check the fence line. Several posts had worked loose in the last storm, and winter was coming. He couldn't afford to lose any stock to wandering. The afternoon sun beat down as he worked his way along the property's edge, testing posts and replacing rotted boards. Near the creek boundary, something caught his eye. Fresh wagon tracks cut across his land, the wheels leaving deep ruts in the soft earth. Ethan frowned, crouching to examine them closer. These weren't here yesterday. Someone had crossed his property during the night, cutting through to avoid the longer road around. He didn't mind folks passing through if they asked permission. But sneaking across in darkness felt wrong. The sun was setting by the time he finished the fence repairs. His back protested as he gathered his tools, reminding him he wasn't as young as he used to be. The first stars were appearing when he headed back to the barn, his lantern casting jumping shadows across the yard. He was so tired he almost missed the small figure sitting in the shadows beside the stallion's stall. The horse wasn't spooked, though it stood calmly, head lowered near where the girl sat cross-legged on the straw-covered floor. Ethan stopped, careful not to make any sudden moves. She was clearly Navajo, dressed in a simple dress and moccasins, her long black hair tied back with a woven band. Though young, perhaps 16 or 17, she had a dignity about her that made her seem older. "Evening," Ethan said quietly. "I'm Ethan Morrow. This is my barn you're sitting in." The girl rose smoothly to her feet, but didn't back away. "I know who you are," she replied in clear English. "I watched you buy him yesterday." She gestured to the stallion, who nickered. Softly, "He seems to know you," Ethan observed, noting how calm the horse remained in her presence. "He should. My father raised him from a colt before the soldiers came." A flash of pain crossed her face. "They took our horses when they broke the treaty. Said we had too many, that we must have stolen them. My father tried to stop them. She paused, squaring her shoulders. "My name is Hazel." Ethan set his lantern down carefully. "I'm sorry about your father, Hazel. Would you like to come to the house? Share some supper, maybe? It's getting cold out here." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Thank you. But first I must tell you something. This horse, he carries our people's bloodlines. The old ones, from before the Spanish came. There are those who will try to take him back. Is that why someone crossed my land last night?" Ethan asked. "Were they looking for him?" "Yes, they know he was sold at auction. They will keep searching." Hazel stroked the stallion's nose. "His spirit is tied to our people's dignity. While soldiers take what is ours, while treaties lie broken in the dust, he represents what we have lost. What we must reclaim." Ethan considered her words carefully. "Come inside," he said finally. "We can talk more where it's warm." In the kitchen, he cut thick slices of bread and set out butter and the last of the summer's apple preserves. Hazel sat straight-backed in Sarah's old chair, her movements precise and controlled. When Ethan offered a plate, she thanked him with grave courtesy. "Where are you staying?" he asked, pouring them both cups of coffee. "Nowhere yet. I followed the horse's tracks from town." She spread preserve on her bread with careful motions. "I had to know he was being treated well." "You can sleep in the spare room tonight," Ethan offered. "It's too cold to be outside." Hazel looked up sharply. "I do not need charity." "It's not charity to offer shelter to someone who's trying to protect what they love," Ethan replied mildly. "The room's empty either way. Might as well be used." She was quiet for a moment, stirring her coffee. "You are kind," she said finally. "Like the horse, you see beyond what others expect. But kindness alone cannot heal what has been broken between our peoples." "No," Ethan agreed, "but it might be a place to start." The lamplight cast warm shadows on the kitchen walls as they finished. Their simple meal. Outside, a coyote called in the distance, and the stallion's answering whinny drifted from the barn. Hazel's eyes turned toward the sound, and Ethan saw none the same mix of love and grief he felt when remembering Sarah. "The spare room's up." "Those stairs, first door on the right," he said, standing to clear the plates. "There's extra blankets in the chest if you need them." Hazel rose gracefully. "Thank you for the meal and the shelter. But you should know others will come looking for him. The bloodlines he carries are sacred to us. Some will see his return as a sign of hope, a way to restore what was lost." "I understand," Ethan said. "We'll figure something out. For tonight, just rest." She nodded once, then climbed the stairs with silent steps. Ethan finished cleaning up, his mind turning over all she'd said, The horse wasn't just a mistreated creature needing kindness. It was a symbol of something far deeper. Tied to promises broken and wounds still raw, he checked the barn one last time before bed. The stallion stood quiet in its stall, ears swiveling, to track his movement. Its eyes, which had held such fear yesterday, now watched him with something closer to acceptance. "Quite a story you've been carrying," Ethan murmured, touching the scarred neck gently. "No wonder you fought so hard against rough handling. You got your people's spirit in you." Sure enough, the horse lowered its head to his shoulder, breathing softly. Ethan stayed there a moment, feeling the warmth of that trust, knowing now it carried an even greater responsibility than he'd first thought. Dawn painted the kitchen windows with pale gold as Ethan stirred a pot of steaming oatmeal. The wooden floorboards creaked softly, announcing Hazel's arrival before she appeared in the doorway, her long black hair freshly braided. "Good morning," she said, moving to the stove. "May I help? Much obliged." Ethan handed her the wooden spoon. "There's honey in that jar if you'd like some." They worked together quietly, setting out bowls and spoons. When Hazel reached for the coffee pot, her movements were sure and practiced, as if she'd done this 100 times before. "I've been thinking," Ethan said as they sat down. "Got a lot needs doing around here. Fences still need mending on the north side, and the livestock wants tending." He stirred his oatmeal thoughtfully. "Could use some help, if you're willing." Hazel's dark eyes studied him. "You would trust me with your animals? Saw how that stallion took to you. Reckon you've got away with creatures." She considered this while adding honey to her bowl. "Yes, I will help. My father taught me much about horses and cattle." "But your neighbors," she paused. "They may not approve." "My neighbors don't run this ranch," Ethan said firmly. "I do." After breakfast, they walked to the barn together. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of sage and distant snow from the mountains. Inside, the stallion greeted them with a soft nicker, and the other animals stirred in their stalls. Ethan watched as Hazel moved from stall to stall, speaking quietly to each animal in a mix of English and Navajo. When she reached the last stall, she stopped. Old Jake, Ethan's most stubborn mule, laid his ears back and stamped. "This one has a proud spirit," Hazel observed, not backing away. "That's one way to put it," Ethan said. "Jake's been giving me trouble since spring. Won't let anyone near to check his hooves." Hazel clicked her tongue softly, speaking in low tones. Jake's ears slowly came forward. She held out an empty hand, palm up, and waited. The mule stretched his neck, sniffing. Gradually his tense posture relaxed within minutes. She had Jake eating from her palm while she ran gentle hands over his legs. The mule stood quietly, accepting her touch like he'd never given anyone trouble in his life. "His left forehoof needs cleaning," she reported. "There's a stone caught near the frog." Ethan shook his head in amazement. "Took me 3 months just to get him to take a carrot from my hand. You've got a gift." Sure enough. They spent the morning checking fence posts, Hazel proving as capable with tools as she was with animals. The work went faster with 2 pairs of hands, and Ethan found himself enjoying the comfortable silence between them, broken only by necessary words about the task at hand that just past noon. The sound of approaching horses made them both look up. 2 riders approached along the fence line, Bill Henderson and Tom Walsh, neighboring ranchers. Ethan's shoulders tensed at their expressions. "Morrow?" Henderson called out, reining in his horse. "What's this we hear about you harboring Indians now, along with that devil horse?" "Morning, Bill," Ethan replied evenly. "This here's Hazel. She's helping with the ranch work." Walsh spat into the dust. "Ain't natural, having one around. That horse, neither. Both liable to turn on you first chance they get." Ethan's hands tightened on his fence post. Heat rose in his chest, the kind of anger he hadn't felt in years. "You watch your mouth, Tom? You're on my land. Won't be yours long if you keep making fool decisions," Henderson sneered. "Best get rid of both of them before something happens. Wouldn't want any accidents." Ethan took a step forward, but Hazel's hand touched his arm lightly. The fence needs finishing before dark, she said clearly, meeting both men's eyes without flinching. We have work to do. Something in her calm dignity made the men shift uncomfortably in their saddles. After a moment, they wheeled their horses around and rode off, leaving only dust and bitter words hanging in the air. I'm sorry about that, Ethan said when they were gone. Their words cannot harm me, Hazel replied, picking up her hammer again. I have heard worse, but I thank you for defending me. They worked until sunset, completing the fence repair. Over. A supper of beans and cornbread, the kitchen warm against the growing cold outside. Ethan found himself speaking of things he rarely shared. Lost my Sarah 5 years ago, he said, staring into his coffee cup. Fever took her in less than a week. Thought the loneliness would eat me alive, those first months. Ranch started failing because I could barely get out of bed some days. Hazel listened quietly, her face gentle in the lamplight. My son Luke, he tried to help, but he was hurting too. Grew angry when I couldn't seem to pull myself together. Started spending more time in town, less at home. Now he only comes by to tell me I'm making mistakes. Ethan sighed. Sometimes. I wonder if he's right. Grief changes people, Hazel said softly. My people know this well. When the soldiers came, when the treaties proved false as morning mist, many of our young men wanted to fight. My father counseled patience, said fighting would only bring more death. Some called him weak. She touched the wooden table with light fingers. But it takes more strength to endure with dignity than to strike in anger. The howl of coyotes interrupted. Them, closer than usual, both turned toward the sound. We should check on him, Hazel said, rising. They took the lantern out to the barn, where the other animals shifted nervously at the coyotes' cries. But the stallion stood calm in his stall, head high, listening to the wild voices without fear. He knows his own strength now, Hazel observed, touching his scarred neck. See how he stands. No longer afraid, but not angry either, just himself. Ethan watched them together, the girl who had lost so much but kept her grace, and the horse. Everyone had condemned that now stood proud and peaceful. Something eased in his chest, a tension he hadn't realized he carried. Thank you, he said quietly, for staying, for helping. Been a long time since this place felt anything but empty. Hazel turned to him, her eyes warm in the lantern light. Thank you for trusting when others would not. My father said a stranger's kindness can be like rain in the desert. Rare, but precious enough to make flowers bloom in dry earth. Another coyote called, and the stallion answered with a soft nicker. In that moment, Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced since Sarah died. A fragile sense of possibility, like a small flame catching in cold darkness. The ranch house didn't feel quite so lonely anymore, with Hazel's quiet presence filling its empty corners with new life. The days settled into a gentle rhythm at the Morrow Ranch. Each morning, Ethan rose before dawn to milk the cow and tend the vegetable patch while Hazel prepared a simple breakfast. The stallion began to expect, their visits nickering softly when they approached his stall together. In my people's way, Hazel explained one morning as she demonstrated how to approach the horse. We believe animals understand more than just words. Her hand moved slowly along the stallion's neck, barely touching the scarred hide. They feel our hearts, our intentions. Ethan watched carefully, noting how she never made sudden movements. Reckon that makes sense. Most troubles I've seen come from folks moving too fast, wanting results right away. The stallion's dark eyes followed them, alert but no longer showing the wild fear that had marked his first days at the ranch. Hazel spoke to him in Navajo, her voice musical and low, though Ethan couldn't understand the words he recognized. The tone of respect, of kinship. What are you telling him? He asked, curious. I remind him of who he is, Hazel replied, running gentle fingers through the horse's tangled mane. Not the angry creature men tried to make him, but a descendant of proud bloodlines. A carrier of stories. She glanced at Ethan. Would you like to try brushing him today? Ethan hesitated. Though the horse accepted his presence now, they hadn't attempted much handling. You think he's ready? He trusts you more than you know. Hazel handed him a soft brush. Move slow. Let him see what you're doing. Remember to breathe. Taking the brush, Ethan approached the way she taught him, angled slightly, never staring directly at the horse. The stallion's ears swiveled forward, interested. Carefully, Ethan raised the brush, letting the horse sniff it first. That's right, Hazel encouraged. Let him choose. The stallion stretched his neck, pressing against the brush. Ethan began with light strokes, marveling at how the horse leaned into the touch. Dried mud and old tangles gradually gave way to reveal. Coat that gleamed like polished copper in the morning light. Well, I'll be, Ethan murmured. You're quite the handsome fellow under all that dirt, aren't you? The peaceful moment shattered at the sound of approaching hoofbeats. The stallion tensed, and Ethan turned to see Luke riding hard toward the barn, his face dark with anger. What's all this I'm hearing in town? Luke demanded, swinging down from his horse, his eyes fixed on Hazel with undisguised hostility. Bad enough you bought that killer horse? Now you're harboring Indians? Luke, Ethan said firmly, setting down the brush. Mind your tone. Hazel is a guest here. A guest? Luke's laugh held no humor. Pa, have you lost your mind completely? The whole town's talking. Says you've gone soft in the head, mixing with her kind. Her kind? Ethan stepped forward, his voice quiet but steel-edged. And what kind would that be, son? God's children. Same as you and me? Luke's face flush red. Don't you preach at me? You're supposed to be a respectable rancher, not some. He gestured wildly at Hazel, who stood silent near the stallion. Not some Indian lover who can't tell friend from foe. I can tell right from wrong clear enough, Ethan replied. Can tell when a person's got a good heart, no matter what others might say about them. Your mama taught you better than this, Luke. Don't you dare bring her into this. Luke's voice cracked. She'd be ashamed to see what you've become, taking. In strays, letting the ranch fall to pieces while you play nursemaid to a killer horse, and, that's enough. Ethan's shout echoed in the barn. The animals stirred uneasily, and even Luke took a step back. I've listened to enough cruel talk from neighbors. I won't hear it from my own son. Faith and decency matter more than gossip, and if you can't see that, then perhaps you need to do some hard thinking about what kind of man you want to be. Luke's jaw worked silently for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was cold. The Ranchers Association is meeting next week. They're talking about what to do about problems like this. I'm going to join them. He swung back onto his horse. For your own good, Pa. Someone's got to talk sense into you. They watched him ride away, dust rising behind his horse's hooves. The stallion snorted softly, and Hazel stroked his neck, murmuring something soothing in Navajo. I'm sorry you had to hear that, Ethan said heavily. Your son carries much anger, Hazel observed. Like the stallion when he first came, striking out because he hurts inside. Ethan nodded slowly. Lost his mama young. Never quite got over it, I reckon. Neither did I, truth be told. They finished the evening chores in companionable silence. As darkness fell, they shared a simple supper of rabbit stew, the lamplight casting warm shadows on the kitchen walls. The familiar creak of the house settling around them felt almost peaceful after the day's confrontation. My father used to say that justice is like water, Hazel said, breaking a piece of cornbread. It finds its own level, no matter what barriers men put in its way. Wise man, your father. Yes. She stirred her stew thoughtfully. He believed in walking in beauty, living in harmony with all things. Even when others chose hatred, he said. We must hold to what is right. Sounds a bit like something from the good book, Ethan replied. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. He smiled slightly. Reckon truth speaks in many languages. After supper, Hazel went to check on the stallion one last time. Ethan remained at the kitchen table, his Bible open before him. The lamp flickered as he knelt beside his chair, closing his eyes in prayer. Lord, he whispered, grant me wisdom for the days ahead. Show me how to be both just and merciful, how to stand firm without hardening my heart. He thought of Luke's angry face, of the threat in his words. Help me find a way to bridge these divides, to help those who are hurting see past their fear. The night wind whispered around the house corners, carrying the distant cry of a coyote. In the barn, the stallion answered with a quiet nicker. Ethan remained on his knees, wrestling with questions of faith and family as tensions mounted around his small ranch-like storm. Clouds gathering on the horizon. Dawn painted the eastern sky in soft rose and gold as Ethan and Hazel made their way to the corral. Morning dew sparkled on the fence rails, and a cool breeze carried the scent of sage. The stallion watched their approach, his ears pricked forward with interest. "We'll take it slow," Ethan said, holding an old saddle blanket folded over his arm. "No need to rush things." Hazel nodded, already murmuring soft greetings in Navajo as she approached the fence. The stallion moved toward her, drawn by the gentle cadence of her voice. His coat gleamed in the early light, testament to their daily grooming. "Good morning, friend," Ethan called softly. He kept his movements deliberate as he opened the corral gate. The horse's nostrils flared, catching the unfamiliar scent of the blanket. They had barely taken 3 steps into the corral when the stallion's demeanor changed. His eyes widened, white showing around the edges, and his muscles bunched beneath his copper coat. Before either of them could react, he reared up with a piercing cry that echoed across the morning quiet ranch. His powerful hooves struck the top rail of the corral fence, splintering wood. The crack of breaking boards sent nearby chickens scattering. In panic, "Easy now," Ethan soothed, taking a step back. "Nobody's going to hurt you." The stallion wheeled and charged toward the opposite fence, tail flagged high in terror. Hazel's voice rose in a steady stream of Navajo words. Never wavering despite the horse's violent display, Ethan found himself humming without conscious thought. An old hymn his wife used to sing during stormy nights. Amazing Grace. How sweet. The sound, the familiar melody, seemed to catch the stallion's attention. His frantic movements slowed, though his sides still heaved with quick breaths. Hazel continued speaking, moving slightly closer as the horse's panic began to ebb. "That's right," she encouraged. "Remember who you are. You are not defined by the harsh hands that hurt you." Gradually, the stallion's breathing steadied. He turned to face them, head lowered, but eyes alert. Ethan kept humming, the hymn flowing, naturally now as he took a careful step forward with the blanket. "Show him first," Hazel instructed quietly. "Let him see it's nothing to fear." Ethan held out the blanket, letting it hang loose where the horse could examine it. After several tense moments, curiosity overcame caution. The stallion stretched, his neck, nostrils quivering as he sniffed the worn fabric. "That's right, friend," Ethan murmured between verses. "Just an old blanket, nothing more." With infinite patience, they allowed the horse to investigate the blanket from every angle. When he finally stood quiet, Ethan slowly raised it toward his back. The stallion tensed but didn't move away. In one smooth motion, Ethan draped the blanket across the broad back. The horse sidestepped once, then stilled. Hazel's smile was radiant as she praised him in both Navajo and English. Joy bubbled up in Ethan's chest, unexpected and bright. This small victory, earned through gentleness rather than force, felt like a confirmation of everything he believed about Mercy's power to heal. "Would you look at that?" he said softly, watching the stallion stand peacefully with the blanket on his back. "Reckon there's hope for all of us, isn't there?" They left the blanket on for only a few minutes before removing it, ending the lesson, while it was still a success. The stallion accepted a pat from each of them before moving off to graze, his manner noticeably calmer than before. Later that morning, while Hazel drew water from the well, the creak of wagon wheels announced travelers. On the road. She paused, bucket half raised, as voices drifted clearly through the still air. "Shameful, that's what it is," a woman's voice declared. "Harboring Indian thieves right there in plain sight." "And that killer horse," a man added. "Mark my words, someone's going to get hurt." Morrow's lost his mind, letting savages and devil spawn run loose on his land. "Better watch your stock careful," another voice advised. "No telling what might go missing with that sort around." The voices faded as the wagon moved on, but their poison lingered in the air. Hazel finished drawing the water, her movements precise. and controlled despite the trembling in her hands that evening. As they sat down to a simple supper of beans and cornbread, Hazel related what she'd overheard. Ethan's weathered face grew grave as he listened. "I'm sorry you had to hear such ugliness," he said finally, breaking his cornbread into small pieces. "Seems there's always those ready to think the worst." "You fear losing their respect," Hazel observed quietly. It wasn't a question. Ethan was silent for a long moment, considering his words carefully. "What little standing I have in town. It ain't much, but it was hard won over many years." He sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing right. By anyone, going against the grain like this." "My father once told me something," Hazel said, her dark eyes gentle with understanding. He said, "Courage is keeping the fire lit when the wind howls loudest. The easy path is not always the right one." Ethan felt something settle in his chest. At her words, like a compass finding true north. "Your father sounds like a wise man. Reminds me of something my Sarah used to say, that doing right matters more than being liked." She too was wise. Hazel smiled. "The stallion showed us today that patience and kindness can overcome fear. Perhaps people can learn the same lesson, if we keep our own fire burning bright." They finished their meal in companionable silence. While outside their window, the evening star rose bright and steady above the darkening plain. The day's small victory with the stallion seemed to glow between them, like a promised proof that gentle hands could heal what violence had broken Dot in the barn. The stallion's soft nickering joined the evening chorus of cricket song, no longer the sound of a creature lost to rage and fear, but of one beginning to remember trust. Sunday dawned clear and bright, with scattered clouds drifting like white cotton across the azure sky. Ethan stood before his spotted mirror, carefully buttoning. His best coat faded black wool that had seen better days, but still carried dignity in its clean-pressed lines. His fingers smoothed down the lapels as morning light streamed through the window Dot in the kitchen. His boots echoed on the wooden floor as he found Hazel standing uncertainly by the stove, wearing her finest dress of dark blue calico. "You sure about this?" she asked, her hands twisting the fabric of her skirt. Ethan nodded, his expression gentle but determined. "The Lord's house should welcome all his children. Besides," he added with a small smile, "they need to see what kindness can accomplish." Outside, dew still sparkled on the grass as they hitched up the wagon. The old horses stood patient in their traces, while Ethan secured the stallion's lead rope to the back. The bay coat gleamed in the morning sun, a testament to their daily grooming. "Easy now, friend," Ethan murmured as he checked the knots. The stallion's ears flicked forward at his voice, no longer showing the wild-eyed fear of weeks past. The wagon wheels creaked a steady rhythm as they made their way toward town. Dust rose in small clouds behind them, gilded by the climbing sun. Hazel sat straight back beside Ethan, her dark eyes fixed on the horizon where the white church steeple rose against the sky dot as they approached the outskirts of town. The sound of hymn singing drifted on the breeze. The small whitewashed church stood proud against the backdrop of golden prairie grass, its weathered cross reaching toward heaven. Wagons and horses already clustered around the hitching posts, while townspeople in their Sunday best gathered on the steps. The singing faltered as Ethan's wagon drew near. Conversations died mid-word as folks turned to stare. Women clutched, their children closer, and men's hands strayed toward their belts, eyeing the stallion with suspicion. Ethan calmly guided the wagon to a stop, helping Hazel down with quiet courtesy. The stallion stood peacefully behind them, head lowered and ears relaxed, a far cry from the demon horse they remembered from the auction. "Morning, neighbors," Ethan said, touching the brim of his hat. Some nodded back reflexively, while others turned away, whispering behind raised hands. "She can't come in here," someone muttered as they approached the church steps. "It ain't proper." "The Lord sees no difference between his children," came a firm voice, and Preacher Josiah stepped through the crowd. His weathered face was stern as he surveyed his congregation. "All who seek his word are welcome in his house." Inside, the church smelled of beeswax candles and old hymnals. Sunlight streamed through simple glass windows, catching dust motes and golden beams. Hazel followed Ethan to a pew near the back, holding her head high despite the rustle of whispers that followed their every move. "Did you see? That Indian girl, and that killer horse outside. What's Morrow thinking?" The whispers died as Preacher Josiah took his place behind the pulpit, his Bible open before him. His deep voice filled the small church as he began to speak, reading from the Gospel of Matthew. "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy," he intoned, his eyes sweeping across the congregation. "Today, we consider what it truly means to show mercy, not just to those who deserve it, but to those the world has cast aside. As the sermon continued, Ethan felt Hazel gradually relax beside him. The preacher's words seemed to wash over the congregation like summer rain, softening hard ground. He spoke of second chances, of seeing with the heart rather than judging with fearful eyes. When the final hymn ended, people began filing out into the bright Sunday morning. Ethan touched Hazel's arm gently. "Time to show them," he said softly. Outside, he led the stallion to the open space before the church steps. The horse moved with quiet grace, its scarred head held proudly. The congregation gathered in a wide circle, many still wearing looks of doubt or fear. Ethan ran his hand along the stallion's neck, speaking too softly for others to hear. Then, with practiced ease, he placed his foot in the stirrup and swung into the saddle. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Many had seen this horse kill men for less, but the stallion stood steady, responding to Ethan's gentle guidance as they walked in a slow circle before the church. Sunlight caught the horse's coat, turning old scars to silver threads among copper. There was no trace of the savage beast they remembered, only quiet strength and dignity. "It's a miracle," someone whispered, and the words rippled through the crowd. Even the most hardened skeptics watched in wonder as Ethan guided the horse through another circle, then brought him to a perfect stop before the church steps. "Preacher." Josiah stepped forward, his eyes bright with understanding. He placed a weathered hand on Ethan's knee, then reached up to touch the stallion's neck. The horse lowered its head, accepting the touch. "This, my friends," the preacher announced, his voice carrying clearly, "is the work of God's grace through gentle hands. When we choose mercy over judgment, love over fear, miracles become possible." The crowd pressed closer now, wonder replacing wariness on their faces. Children pointed excitedly, and several men removed their hats in respect. Ethan caught glimpses of Hazel standing quietly by the church door, her face glowing with quiet pride as the sun climbed toward noon. The congregation began to disperse, many pausing to speak quietly with Ethan or nod respectfully to Hazel. The preacher's words seemed to have opened something in their hearts, if only a crack. The wagon ride home felt lighter somehow, as if a weight had lifted. The stallion followed contentedly behind them, his hooves raising small puffs of dust in the warm afternoon light. "You did well today," Hazel said softly, as the ranch came into view. "Both of you." Ethan smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace settle over him. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," he replied. "Sometimes it takes a gentle heart to help others see his truth." They were unaware of the shadowy figures that watched their passing from a distant ridge, following the horse's trail with hungry eyes. But for now, the Sunday afternoon wrapped them in golden light and hard-won hope. As they made their way home across the sun-drenched prairie, the evening sky had turned deep purple when Ethan lit the barn lantern, its warm glow casting dancing shadows across weathered wooden walls. The stallion's coat gleamed like polished copper as he ran the brush over its flanks, still marveling at how the animal leaned into his touch now. "Who would have thought, friend?" Ethan murmured, working out a tangle in the horse's mane. "You've sure come a long way from that auction day." Hazel stood nearby, humming a melody that seemed to float on the evening air. The stallion's ears twitched forward at the sound, and it stretched its scarred neck toward her. Her small hand reached up to stroke its forehead, fingers tracing the white blaze that ran like a streak of moonlight down its face. "He remembers songs from long ago," she said softly. "My father used to sing to the horses at night, just like this." The lantern light caught the gentle smile on her face, and Ethan felt a familiar ache in his chest. It had been so long since. His ranch held any music besides his own quiet hymns. Later, as they sat at the kitchen table with bowls of steaming stew, Ethan broke off a piece of cornbread and considered the day's events. "Seemed like some folks' hearts might be changing," he said thoughtfully. "Even old Tom Webster nodded to us after service. Never thought I'd see that day." Hazel stirred her stew, her expression thoughtful. "The horse impressed them," she agreed, then looked up with knowing eyes. "But admiration is like morning dew. It fades quick under a hot sun. Some wounds run deeper than Sunday sermons can heal." Ethan nodded slowly, knowing the truth in her words. Years of distrust couldn't be undone in a single morning, no matter how miraculous the next day dawned clear and cool, with dew sparkling on the prairie grass. Ethan pulled on his boots and headed out to check the cattle, his breath making small clouds in the morning air. But as he reached the north pasture, his heart sank. The fence lay in ruins, posts knocked askew and wire cut clean through in several places. Cattle had wandered through the gaps, scattered across the neighboring fields like brown dots on the green landscape. This was no accident. Every cut was too precise, too deliberate. "Lord, give me strength," Ethan muttered, running a calloused hand over his face. He'd expected some pushback after yesterday, but this felt like a knife in his gut. The sound of hoofbeats made him turn. Hazel approached on one of the ranch horses, her dark hair catching the morning light. One look at the fence told her everything. "I'll help round up the strays," she said simply, already turning her mount toward the scattered cattle. For the next few hours, they worked in seamless partnership. Hazel's horsemanship showed in every movement, the way she anticipated the cattle's reactions, how she guided her horse with the slightest touch. She moved like she was part of the animal beneath her, just as her people had done for generations. Ethan found himself watching in admiration as she cut off a particularly stubborn steer, turning it back toward the herd with practiced ease. There was a grace to her riding that made his own skills seem clumsy in comparison. By midday, they had the cattle gathered and contained in the south pasture. Ethan wiped sweat from his brow as he hammered another fence post into place, the sun beating down on his shoulders. His muscles ached, but a different kind of warmth grilled his chest when he saw Hazel bringing the wire stretcher. "Much obliged," he said, taking the tool. "Don't know how I would have managed all this alone." Hazel settled beside him, helping to hold the wire straight. "You don't have to manage alone anymore?" She replied quietly. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Ethan's hands stilled on the wire as he looked around his ranch, at the field he'd worked for decades. The barn that needed painting, the house that had stood empty of family for too long. That evening, they sat at the kitchen table again, remains of cornbread and beans on their plates. The lamp cast a warm circle of light around them, making the shadows beyond seem deeper. Outside, a whippoorwill called into the gathering dark. Ethan broke the comfortable silence, voicing the thought that had been growing all day. "You know something? This old place feels alive again." He gestured with his coffee cup at the walls. "Around them was a time I thought it never would." After Sarah passed, then Luke left. He trailed off, then squared his shoulders. But now there's purpose here again. Life. A smile touched Hazel's lips, but Ethan caught the shadow that passed through her eyes. She glanced toward the window, where the barn lay dark against the night sky. Her fingers worried at the edge of her plate, betraying an unspoken concern. "What's troubling you?" Ethan asked gently. Hazel met his gaze, then looked down at her hands. "The fence wasn't the first warning," she said softly. "And it won't be the last. There are those who won't rest until they drive us both away. You for sheltering me for being who I am." "Then they'll have a long wait ahead of them," Ethan replied firmly. "This is your home now, too, if you want it. And I don't give up. What's mine? Not to bullies. Not to anyone." The lamplight caught the moisture in Hazel's eyes as she nodded, but Her smile was genuine now. Together, they sat in the warm circle of light. Two unlikely allies finding family in each other's strength. While the night pressed dark against the windows in the distant, coyotes sang to the stars. Thunder rolled across the darkening prairie. Like distant drums, and rain hammered against the ranch house windows. Ethan lay in his bed, listening to the storm's fury. The weather had turned fierce just after sunset, bringing sheets of rain that filled the dry gullies and turned the yard to mud. To mud. A sharp crack of thunder made the window panes rattle. Ethan pulled his quilt tighter, remembering how his wife Sarah used to comfort Luke during storms like this. The memory ached like an old wound. Through the drumming rain, another sound caught. His attention different, out of place. Footsteps, muffled but distinct, coming from the direction of the barn. Ethan sat up, straining to hear. There it was again, the unmistakable crunch of boots on wet gravel. His heart pounding, Ethan threw back the covers and grabbed his coat. With practiced hands, he lit the brass lantern that sat on his bedside table. The flame sputtered to life, casting wild shadows on the walls. Lord above, he whispered, pulling on his boots. No honest person would be out in weather like this. He hurried down the hallway, passing Hazel's closed door. The floorboards creaked beneath his feet as he made his way to the kitchen. Rain lashed against the windows as he lifted the lantern, its light barely piercing the darkness outside. The barn door stood open, swinging in the wind. Ethan's blood ran cold. He'd secured that door himself before sunset, same as every night. Without hesitation, he plunged into the downpour, holding the lantern high. Rain pelted his face as he splashed through puddles, his boots sinking into mud with every step. "Hello?" he called out, his voice nearly lost in the storm. "Who's there?" The barn's interior loomed dark and eerily quiet when he entered. Water dripped from his coat as he raised the lantern, illuminating empty stalls one by one. His heart stopped when he reached the stallion's space. The stall stood empty. Broken ropes dangled from the post where he'd secured the horse for the night. "No," Ethan breathed, touching the frayed ends of rope with trembling fingers. "No, no, no." A gasp behind him made him turn. Hazel stood in the doorway, her shawl clutched tight around her shoulders, her eyes wide with horror as she took in the scene. "They took him," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They actually took him." Ethan's mind raced. The horse couldn't have been gone long. The ropes were freshly cut, still swinging slightly. "Get your coat," he said firmly. "We might still catch them if we hurry." They saddled their horses as quickly as they could, working by lantern light. The rain had softened the ground, making the hoof prints of the stolen stallion clear in the mud. They led away from the barn, heading east toward the open prairie. Ethan and Hazel followed the tracks through the stormy night, their lanterns bobbing like fireflies in the darkness. Thunder crashed overhead, and lightning split the sky in brilliant forks. The trail wound through shallow creek beds, now swollen with rainwater, and across open grassland where the wind whipped their faces. Hours passed. The rain never ceased, slowly washing away the tracks they followed. As false dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, Ethan pulled his horse to a stop. The trail, already faint, disappeared completely in a broad wash where floodwater had scoured the ground clean. "We've lost them," he said heavily, his voice rough with exhaustion. Beside him, Hazel's shoulders slumped. They had pushed their horses as hard as they dared in the darkness, and now had nothing to show for it. The ride back to the ranch seemed endless. Morning light revealed their bedraggled state, clothes soaked through, boots caked with mud, faces drawn with fatigue. They had just finished tending to their tired horses when the sound of approaching hoofbeats made them look up. A rider was galloping toward the ranch, his horse's flanks dark with sweat. Ethan recognized Tom Webster's boy, one of the younger. Hands from the neighboring spread, Mr. Morrow. The boy called out, reining his horse to a stop. "That stallion of yours, it's been spotted." Ethan's heart leaped. "Where?" "Down by the railroad camp," the boy said, catching his breath. "Some fellows saw it being led through just after sunrise. Thought you ought to know." Ethan thanked the boy, his mind already racing with plans. But as the rider departed, something caught his eye. Fresh boot prints in the mud near the barn, partially filled with rainwater. He knelt to examine them more closely, and his blood turned to ice. He knew those boots. Had bought them himself. Last Christmas, in fact. Luke's tracks, clear as day, mingled with the other footprints from the night's theft. The revelation hit Ethan like a physical blow. He staggered, catching himself against the barn wall. His own son, his flesh and blood, helping thieves steal the horse, betraying not just the ranch, but everything they'd once held sacred as a family. Ethan? Hazel's concerned voice seemed to come from far away. What is it? He couldn't speak. Could barely breathe past the vice grip of grief around his chest. Wordlessly, he pointed to the tracks. Hazel looked, then drew in a sharp breath as understanding dawned. "Oh, Ethan," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." The day passed in a blur. Ethan moved through his chores like a man sleepwalking, his hands performing familiar tasks while his heart ached with a pain deeper than any physical wound. As evening approached, he found himself sitting before the cold hearth in the ranch house, staring into the empty fireplace. First Sarah, taken by illness despite all his prayers. Now Luke, choosing a path that could only lead to ruin. The weight of it all pressed down on him until he could barely hold himself upright. "Lord," he whispered into the gathering darkness, his voice rough with unshed tears. "Don't let me lose him too. Please, not my boy. Not like this." The words hung in the silent room, a father's desperate prayer echoing off walls that had witnessed so much love and loss. Outside, the storm had passed, but darker clouds were gathering on the horizon of Ethan's heart. The first rays of sunlight crept over the eastern horizon, painting the prairie in soft gold. Ethan stood in his weathered barn, methodically saddling his old mar. His movements were practiced but heavy with purpose, each buckle and strap adjusted with care born from years of experience. The mar's familiar brown coat gleamed in the early light, her breath visible in the cool morning air. Hoofbeats on packed earth announced Hazel's approach. She led her pony, already cocked and ready. Her dark eyes held determination as she watched Ethan work. "I'm coming with you," she said. Firmly, no question in her voice. Ethan paused, his hand resting on the mare's flank. "It could be dangerous. Those railroad men. That stallion carries my people's honor," Hazel interrupted, her chin lifting. "My father's spirit rides with him. I won't stay behind." The quiet strength in her words reminded Ethan of Sarah. Wife had shown that same resolve whenever principle was at stake. He nodded slowly, understanding this wasn't just about recovering stolen property. It was about justice. They mounted up as the sun cleared the horizon. The morning was crisp, dew sparkling on the grass as they rode east. Their horses' hooves made soft thuds against the earth, establishing a steady rhythm that matched the beating of their hearts. The railroad camp lay a full day's ride away. Ethan kept their pace measured, knowing they needed to preserve their mount's strength. As they rode, the familiar landscape rolled past golden prairie grass rippling in the breeze. Scattered cottonwoods marking the path of hidden creeks, hawks circling lazily overhead by midday. The sun beat down fierce and hot. They stopped at a creek where cottonwoods offered patches of shade. While the horses drank from the clear water, Ethan and Hazel sat on sun-warmed rocks, sharing strips of dried jerky and cornbread. Luke wasn't always angry, Ethan said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. He stared at the creek's flowing water, seeing instead his son's face as a boy bright with laughter, eager to learn. After his mother passed, something changed. In him, like a door closed in his heart. Hazel listened, her eyes gentle. "Grief can turn sweet water bitter," she said softly. "My father used to say that. Your father sounds like a wise man." He was. Hazel's fingers traced patterns in the dirt. "He taught me our healing ways, our sacred songs. I dreamed of following that path, becoming a healer for our people." Her voice caught slightly, but then the soldiers came with their papers and guns, said the treaties had changed, forced us from our ancestral lands. Ethan's heart ached at the pain in her voice. I'm sorry, he said, knowing the words were inadequate. They rode on through the afternoon, the sun wheeling overhead. The landscape gradually changed, prairie giving way to more broken country. By dusk, they spotted the wooden buildings of the trading post, a lonely outpost of civilization on the frontier's edge. The trading post was a 2-story structure, weathered boards silvered by sun and wind. A handful of horses stood tied to the rail out front, steam rising from their sweaty flanks in the cool evening air. Inside, the store smelled of leather, tobacco, and coffee. While Hazel arranged for grain for their horses, Ethan made his way to the telegraph office tucked in the corner. The operator, a thin man with ink-stained fingers, looked up from his clicking machine. Need to send a message, Ethan said, pulling out paper and pencil. He wrote carefully, each word chosen with purpose. 2. Preacher Josiah Hull stolen property. Held at railroad camp, stop false claims being made. Stop require witness of law and church to Ethan Morrow. The operator's P clicked out the message, each tap echoing in the quiet store. Ethan paid the fee, praying the preacher would understand the urgency between the lines. Night had fallen fully by the time they finished caring for their horses. The trading post owner, seeing their exhaustion, offered them space in the loft above the store. They climbed the narrow stairs, finding a clean-swept floor scattered with fresh hay. Ethan spread his bedroll near the wall, but sleep eluded him. He lay still, staring up at the rough-hewn rafters, barely visible in the darkness. The wood creaked softly with the buildings settling, and somewhere an owl called into the night. From across the loft came the soft sound of Hazel's voice, barely above a whisper. The words were in Navajo, flowing like water over stones, a prayer. Ethan realized, though he couldn't understand the language, the reverence in her tone needed no translation. He closed his eyes, adding his own silent prayer to hers. For guidance, for justice, for his son's heart to remember the truth it once knew. The owl called again, closer now, as if bearing their prayers up into the vast prairie night dot in the darkness. Ethan felt a curious peace settle over him. Whatever tomorrow might bring, they wouldn't face it alone. God's hand had brought them this far, him, a broken-down rancher, and Hazel, a displaced healer, united in their quest for justice. As different as their paths had been, they had found common ground in mercy and truth. The rafters creaked again softly. Hazel's prayers had fallen silent, replaced by the steady breathing of sleep. Ethan listened to the quiet sounds of the night, keeping vigil as the hours crept toward dawn, and whatever challenge it would bring. Dawn painted the sky in streaks of pink and gold as Ethan and Hazel crested the final ridge. Below them sprawled the railroad camp, a chaos of canvas tents, wooden shacks, and iron rails stretching toward the horizon. Steam hissed from idling engines, and the air rang with hammers and shouted orders. Men lounged between the tents, some already drinking. Despite the early hour, others hunched over dice games. Ethan's heart clenched as he spotted the stallion. They'd tied it to a post near the camp's edge, its proud head hanging low. Railroad men circled it, jabbing with sticks and laughing as the horse flinched and pulled against its ropes. Its coat, which had begun to shine under gentle care, was now dull with dust and fear. "Easy now," Hazel whispered, placing a steadying hand on Ethan's arm as his fist tightened on the reins. Anger won't serve us here. Movement near the horse drew their attention. Luke emerged from between two tents, his familiar stride carrying him toward a cluster of well-dressed men, the railroad bosses. Even from this distance, Ethan could read the tension in his son's shoulders as he gestured and argued with them. "They're refusing to pay what they promised," Hazel murmured. Her keen eyes picking up the details of the exchange, Ethan watched his son's desperate attempts to prove himself to these men, and his heart ached. He sold more than just the horse. He said softly, he sold his own self-respect. They retreated to a sheltered hollow to wait out the day. As sunset painted the western sky crimson, Ethan checked his pocket watch in the fading light. "Time," he said simply. Hazel nodded and slipped away toward the eastern edge of camp, where native laborers gathered around cooking fires. Soon, Her voice rose in Navajo, drawing curious workers away from their posts. The guards turned to watch. Distracted by the unexpected disruption, Ethan moved through deepening shadows, keeping to the spaces between tents. The stallion stood alone now, its dark form stark against the last light. Drawing closer, Ethan began to hum the old hymn that had first gentled the horse. The familiar notes carried soft on the evening air. The stallion's ears pricked forward. It lifted its head, recognizing the song even amid the camp's clamor. A soft nicker greeted Ethan. He stepped into view. That's far enough, Pa. Luke's voice cut through the twilight. He stepped out from behind a stack of railroad ties, revolver steady in his hand. The last rays of sunlight caught his face, revealing the conflict there, the boy he'd been warring. With the man he thought he needed to become, father and son stood frozen, the stallion shifting nervously between them, while around them the railroad camp continued its restless motion. Unaware of the drama unfolding in its midst, the acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air as it drunk. Railroad worker fired his pistol. Skyward. Show him what you're made of, boy. Someone shouted at Luke. Other men joined in, their voices thick with whiskey and malice. Prove you ain't soft like your pa. Another shot cracked through the evening air. The stallion reared suddenly, its powerful hooves slicing through the darkness. Luke stumbled backward, losing his grip on the revolver as the horse's massive form towered above him. In the chaos, his boot caught on a railroad tie, and he fell. The stallion's hooves descended toward Luke's chest, promising certain death. Without hesitation, Ethan lunged forward, placing himself between his son and the panicked horse. His voice rose clear and strong in the old hymn that had gentled the stallion so many times before. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. The effect was immediate. The stallion's hooves touched earth harmlessly to the side as the horse lowered its head, drawn to the familiar melody. Its breathing steadied, and it stepped closer to Ethan, seeking comfort in his presence. A hush fell over the camp. Men who, moments ago, had been shouting stood slack-jawed, watching as Ethan's gentle song tamed the supposedly savage. Even the steam engines seemed to quiet their hissing. Luke broke the silence with a ragged sob. I just wanted them to respect me, he choked out, still sprawled in the dirt. To stop saying I was weak, like he couldn't finish. Ethan knelt beside his son, gathering him close as his own tears fell. There's more strength in mercy than in cruelty, son. I forgive you. This is all very touching, a railroad boss sneered, stepping forward with papers in hand. But this horse is railroad property now. We have the bill of sale right here. Those papers are false. Hazel's voice rang out as she pushed through the crowd. They bear no true signature, only marks made by trickery. The camp erupted. Native workers shouted support for Hazel's claims while railroad men bellowed threats. Gamblers scattered as fists began to fly in the growing darkness in the confusion. Ethan seized his chance. With the fluid grace of long practice, he swung onto the stallion's bare back. He reached down, helping Hazel up behind him. Luke scrambled to his feet, and Ethan pulled him up last. The stallion gathered itself, then burst forward into a powerful gallop. They thundered past the outer tents as angry shouts and curses followed them into the night. The cool wind whipped away the camp's chaos, carrying them toward home under a sky bright with stars. Pink light crept over the horizon as Ethan, Luke, and Hazel rode into the trading post, their bodies aching from the hard night's journey. The stallion's coat gleamed with sweat, but it held its head high, proud despite exhaustion. They had barely dismounted when hoofbeats thundered from both directions. From the east came Preacher Hale with a dozen townsfolk. From the west, railroad, men galloped up in a cloud of dust, waving papers and shouting about theft. We have legal claim, the railroad boss bellowed, thrusting documents forward. Hazel stepped into the morning light. Those marks are false, she declared, her voice steady. The Treaty of 1863 specifically protected these bloodlines. My father showed me the true documents before he died. Preacher Hale nodded gravely. She speaks truth. I've seen those treaties myself. He turned to address the gathering crowd. These men twist the law for profit, caring nothing for honor or justice. The townsfolk pressed closer, faces hardening as understanding dawned. Even those who had once scorned Ethan now stood beside him. Luke stepped forward, shoulders trembling. "I helped them steal the horse," he confessed. "I was wrong. Please forgive." Ethan pulled both Luke and Hazel close. "This horse wasn't a curse," he said clearly. "It showed us that mercy wins over hatred." The crowd erupted in cheers as the railroad men turned their horses. Slinking away in defeat. Autumn painted the prairie in shades of amber and gold as the late September sun warmed the ranch. Ethan watched from the fence line as Luke hammered. A post into place, his movements sure and steady now. Nearby, Hazel wove wire between weathered posts, her gentle Navajo melody drifting across the pasture. The stallion grazed contentedly in the meadow, its once angry scars softening with each passing day. Its coat shone like polished copper in the afternoon light, a far cry from the frightened creature they'd rescued months ago. Inside the ranch house that evening, lamplight cast warm shadows across the worn kitchen table. Steam rose from bowls, but fragrant stew as Ethan bowed his head in prayer. "Lord, we thank you for this food, for justice done, and most of all for bringing this family together." Luke's smile, though faint, reached his eyes, the bitterness finally fading. Hazel paused at the window, watching the stallion beneath the rising moon. She whispered ancient blessings in her native tongue, words of protection and peace. Later, Ethan stood on the porch, lantern casting a gentle glow. The night air carried the soft nickering of horses and the rustle of prairie grass. His heart swelled with gratitude. Where once grief had hollowed these walls, now love and faith filled every corner. His home breathed with new life at last. If today's story reminded you of the quiet strength of love, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow we'll meet right here, where love speaks softly and stays.